So we'll wait another minute because we have a bunch of people who have signed up who have not here yet. We're going to get started in a moment. For those who are just coming in, just make sure that you stay muted, please. And we are recording, so if you don't want your picture to be recorded, you can turn your video off if you prefer. We'll get started. We'll get started in a moment. So, Lisa, you think we can go ahead?
Okay. Welcome, everybody. Really excited about this program. I'm trying to stall a little bit because we have so many people signed up and trying to give a few more people time, but we'll get started. Welcome, and for those of you that are not members of Chartsvilla, welcome to our program. All of you members of Harold's fan club, as I am also a member. We have 2 videos we're going to show, and after both videos, there will be time for questions. So first, let me just read, introduce you to a few people, and then read a little bit from Harold's bio. Rabbi Jonah Lehman is one of our facilitators, and then Babette Cohen, our education director. She's kind of behind the scenes doing all the videos. And Harold Radish and his daughter Ellen Radish, a member, and her husband Seth Zarni. You can see all 3 of them in their screen. Okay, ready to go. Harold Radish lives in Douglaston, New York, in the house that he built more than 50 years ago, and then doubled its size by himself during his retirement. In this house, he and his wife raised 2 daughters, and they were both teachers in the New York school system. Hal has 2 daughters, 3 wonderful granddaughters, and 2 great-grandchildren. He just got back from seeing them in St. Louis. He's a World War II veteran, having been drafted while in the first year of college at NYU. Sent to Europe about a month after D-Day, he fought in France and Germany through the Battle of the Bulge and was captured by the Germans soon after in February. Before surrendering, he and his fellow soldiers threw away their dog tags so that the Germans did not know that he was Jewish. Hal and a fellow prisoner watched out for each other and kept each other going. He was liberated by the English Army in April, right after the death of FDR, and was awarded the French Legion of Honor for having served in France. In the last few years, he has participated in events at the World War II Memorial here in DC and has traveled with a group called the Greatest Generation Foundation for the anniversary of the liberation of Paris, Normandy, and was one of 2 American veterans to go to Russia this past November for the 80th anniversary of the siege of Leningrad, which is what we'll see about in the second video. The first video was taken by his neighbor, and it tells the story of part of his mess kit that was found in Luxembourg and was just returned to him last year. It had markings on it and was found very near to where his outfit was on the move. Those are all important things to know about him. And just off the cuff, to me, what's more important, and I think you'll even get this on Zoom, you spend 5 minutes in the presence of this man and you will be changed. And you will be a member of the fan club, just like I am. So we're going to start with the first video that we talked about. It's a very short one. And then in between, we won't really do anything much, but we'll just go on to the second video. And if you have questions, you can start typing them in the chat, but we won't address them until after both videos.
Okay.
One second. Okay. 1 second. When you type in the chat, make sure when you're typing the question that the chat is going to everyone and not a particular person. That way, or you can send it to me. You can either chat directly to Jonah Lehman or to everyone.
Wait, 1 second.
Go ahead.
This cup from my mess kit was sent to me from a fellow in Luxembourg. He did the iron, he did an electronic sweep, and he found it in the ground there. And this was there from January 1945. And that was the time that I was there, I was in the service. I don't remember getting rid of the cup, but I'm sure I had it. And it's quite coincidental that he was able to find me and send me the cup. I really appreciate it.
Let's look at your name on the bottom.
Can you get the name?
Yeah, turn it around.
Oh, this way?
Yeah, you scratched your name in here.
Yeah, it's scratched in there somewhere.
Radish, R-A-D-I-S-H.
Right.
This cup is from 1918.
Surprise, huh?
Huh. Reissued to you from World War I.
Okay. All right, do a new share.
Okay, we're going to go on to the next video. And this one is closer to 20 minutes long. So here we go.
Just wanted
Give
to
me a
say,
second.
I just want to say something here as Babette is getting it ready, that this video takes place in Russia just this past November. And this is at a time when honoring, of course, remembering that Russia was our ally in World War II. And it is under that sentiment that we should be watching this video, not based on what's happening with Russia and Ukraine today. So please keep this in mind, that this is commemorating events from World War II and not honoring Russia today.
Okay.
It is one last mission.
Okay, have a great fight.
For two men who first answered the call to serve 8 decades ago.
I'm very proud. Thank you very much.
They are the heroes of World War II. One of them, 102 years old.
It's a dream.
He was there the very day America was first attacked, plunging our country into war. The other, an army soldier held prisoner for months by the Nazis in Germany.
Yeah.
Their service and sacrifice makes them among the very greatest
It's been a long, long time.
of a great generation.
Oh, it's amazing. This is so awe-inspiring.
And even after a century on Earth,
Is there something odd about waving an American flag right outside the Kremlin?
it turns out their adventure isn't over just yet.
It was the highlight of my life in a way.
Join us as we travel with these two veterans
Let's be friends forever.
Thank you for being here.
Oh,
On everything.
it's an honor. It's an honor.
halfway around the globe
It made me kind of feel at home since my mother is Russian.
to a place where strangers
He's full of wonderful stories to tell.
in a strange land
I'm proud of this moment and happy.
pay tribute for the very first time.
Something that never happened to me before. Somebody doing something for me because they think I was a hero or something.
A place where allies turned adversaries join hands in unity once again. Tonight, we're on a journey to Russia for a gathering of veterans, decades in the making.
And I'm just thrilled that I can do it.
It's a celebration of soldiers who may have worn different uniforms and spoke different languages, but found common ground in a cause.
We're like one people.
Fighting for freedom.
We have a lot of love for each other.
Think you'll be back?
Oh, I'll be back if I ever get another chance to do it while I'm still young.
Meeting in Moscow. A final reunion for the heroes of World War II.
Their arrival at the Kremlin headlined the Moscow Evening News.
Ветераны из 3 стран встретились в России, чтобы почтить память героев и жертв.
Cameras following their every move. For many in Russia, this was the first time they'd ever met an American, much less one with this kind of role in history.
I thank the Russians.
Спасибо огромное, Рус.
For Harold Radish, this trip to this place is the realization of a lifelong dream.
Ever since I was a little kid, I've heard about this, but now I am here. And thank God that I am. Red Square.
The 97-year-old veteran never imagined he'd see this in person. If only his mom could see him now.
Coming to Russia was sort of a family kind of thing. My mother and father grew up in Russia, and they came to America, and that's where I was born, in America. And if I ever told my mother that I was going back to Russia, she'd say, "You're crazy." Oh boy, I could almost change religions, it's so nice.
On this night during this visit, the buildings in this city of 12 million people aren't the only things glowing. So is this U.S. Army veteran, suddenly the toast of the town in Moscow. Harold is one of 2 World War II veterans representing the United States in a rare multinational celebration of service that has brought together allies from Russia, France, and America for the first time. A mission carried out in part by the Greatest Generations Foundation, a charity that honors the sacrifice of those who've served.
As we're coming up to our 20th anniversary of our foundation, it's always been a wish of mine to come back here to Russia and to bring Americans back with us, to honor all those who have gone before us.
And in Russia, a lot of people, soldiers and civilians, have gone before us. The former Soviet Union lost more people than any other country in World War II, an estimated 27 million people in all, most of them civilians, as many as 9 million soldiers.
I realized that they did a lot for us because during the war, they were fighting the Germans and keeping the Germans occupied so that we didn't have to send a lot of troops. We could use our troops to fight in France, to get through Germany.
Give them a salute too, okay?
This gathering of heroes at the Alexander Garden, just outside the Kremlin walls, pays tribute to those soldiers. Next to this eternal flame is the tomb of the unknown soldier. In it, the body of a soldier killed in World War II, or as the Russians call it, the Great Patriotic War. The soldier died in the Battle of Moscow in late 1941, at the spot where Nazi forces got closest to the Soviet capital, just 19 miles outside of town. The Battle of Moscow was one of the most important battles of the war and among the most deadly, with more than 1 million total casualties. A deep respect for the war and those who fought it is embedded in this country's culture, even to this day.
They seem to recognize their soldiers. They have all sorts of statues, etc., cemeteries, and other places where they recognize their soldiers.
Very good teacher.
And it's the reason these men are so revered.
It's very nice, and I really appreciate it, to meet with the people from around the world, different countries. It's just wonderful. And we're like one people. I was captured. I was a prisoner of the Germans.
They are especially entranced by Harold's story.
A few months, okay.
A Jewish man taken captive by the Nazis.
To make sure that I wouldn't have any real problems because of my religion, I got rid of my dog tags. Sometimes I say to myself, was I a coward? But it saved my life, and that was the most important thing.
In early 1945, at just 19 years old, he was captured and held as a prisoner of war at Stalag 12A, a POW camp in Germany, for 4 months. First came the illness and starvation.
And then, of course, you had all the bugs. You had lice, you had cockroaches, all kinds of stuff that we'd never seen in our lives before.
Finally, in the spring of that year, as the war neared its end, Allied soldiers arrived and liberated the camp.
When we got up in the morning, the British were there, and they had almost like a Red Cross wagon outside with some food. I remember, it was noodles, it was hot, and it was good.
At last, a free man, Harold spent his post-war years as a school woodshop teacher.
Victory or defeat.
And in recent years, he served as an ambassador for the Greatest Generations Foundation.
See that? Come to Russia, you got two blondes pushing you.
Traveling all over the world, telling his story and honoring those millions of others who served in World War II and helped win it.
I'm gonna shake his hand.
Including the very men he now embraces, right here in Red Square, of all places. For a man who has experienced a lot of unexpected things in his life, add this to the list.
At my age, to be able to be here and to see all of this is something that's luck, something that's very, very important.
This is a sacred spot for the people of St. Petersburg, a place they visit throughout the year to remember those relatives buried here. The beauty of this cemetery belies the cruelty that necessitated these hallowed grounds in the first place. About 500,000 people, most of them civilians, are buried in these mass graves on this site, beneath grass-covered mounds marked by the year they died in what many historians consider a genocide. The siege of Leningrad was a barbaric blockade that choked off this city from much of the rest of the world for 900 days during World War II, and left 1 million people dead, mostly from cold and starvation. From September 8, 1941 to January 27, 1944, the Nazis surrounded this city. It was Hitler's intention to erase St. Petersburg from the face of the earth. The easiest way to do it: starve its people to death. At its worst, as many as 100,000 people per month were dying of hunger. Some even resorted to cannibalism.
I believe it's important for the next generation to understand the tremendous sacrifice that was played out by the Russians during World War II. As you know, the number is staggering.
It's so crazy to fight that the war is nuts. It's not the kind of thing. It is better to talk and talk and talk.
When the Soviets finally beat back the Germans in 1944, the celebration here was muted because the losses had been so great. On this day, World War II veterans from Russia and France and the United States visit the mass graves and pay tribute. For months, locals here had been planning, preparing, and anticipating the arrival of these World War II heroes, and wanted to make sure the melancholy parts were matched by the musical. That's where these children come in. During a private performance at the famed Hermitage Museum, kids dressed in miniature 1940s Red Army uniforms, performing for a captivated crowd of foreigners. Hard to say who was more impressed, the concertgoers or the kids, who jockeyed for a chance to stand next to and meet these beloved audience members. Children are taught World War II history at an early age in this country, but never could they imagine learning it from a living historian like 102-year-old Mickey Ganich.
First, my mother is Russian. My dad was Serbian.
He too has close ties to this part of the world.
But I've never been to this country before.
As he told this Russian news crew during this interview inside a World War II museum, he joined the Navy in January 1941 because things around the world weren't looking good. After boot camp, he reported to the battleship USS Pennsylvania. On December 7th, 1941, docked at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, he had football on his mind.
We were scheduled to play the USS Arizona for a fleet football championship, 1 o'clock that day.
At 5 minutes to 8 that morning, he already had his football clothes on when the Japanese torpedoes started flying.
They hit us with a 500-pound bomb. Missed me about 45 feet. It came between the two masts, came on down, exploded away below me there.
Amazingly, he wasn't hurt, but the attack he survived thrust the United States into a war that already consumed much of the world.
A date which will live in infamy.
A war the Russians were already fighting.
The next day after the attack on Pearl Harbor, blocks long, people lined up, wanted to join the service. They wanted to do their part.
Mickey went on to fight throughout the South Pacific throughout the rest of the war until his ship was bombed once again in Okinawa at war's end.
I was able to get patched up enough so we got back to the States by ourselves.
Most every December 7th, Mickey returns to Hawaii to mark the anniversary of the attack he survived. And he'll be there again in a couple of weeks for the 80th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. Hard to believe it was 8 decades ago he traveled the world fighting for freedom.
I thought maybe 10, 15 years ago I thought I'd make it, but never made it.
And hard to believe at 102 years old, against all odds, he's still traveling and bringing as much attention as he can to the heroes of World War II, no matter which country they call home.
God is looking out for me. God bless me to be here, and God bless the Russians too. Thank you very much.
Welcome back as we travel with the Greatest Generations Foundation to Russia for a once-in-a-lifetime gathering of World War II heroes. We've come here with Pearl Harbor survivor Mickey Ganich.
The Dodgers.
Dodgers?
Yeah,
I know.
They moved out of New York, out of Brooklyn.
And Harold Radish, an Army soldier held prisoner of war by the Germans at the end of World War II. While for decades it has seemed the Russians were laser-focused on the Cold War, in recent years their attention has turned again to the 1940s and what they called the Great Patriotic War. The Soviets' victory in World War II is 80 years later a big part of their national identity.
In my religion, I was always envious of you guys. You went to church and you were there 2-3 hours.
Yeah.
When we went to synagogue, we had to stay all day.
And nowhere is that more glaring than at the opulent Cathedral of the Armed Forces, opened just a year ago. It is an unusual mix of patriotism and religion. Its centerpiece, a 300-foot gold-domed church.
Wow. This is really something. Made the trip worthwhile.
Located at a place called Patriot Park. Vladimir Putin opened the memorial and museum himself, and it's been referred to as a military Disneyland. Attached to it, a mile-long museum with war mementos and recreations. Total cost of this place, a reported 6 million rubles. That's about $86 million.
Подвиг народа, которую вы сегодня посетите.
It is not the only place Putin spared no expense, like here at the Museum of the Great Patriotic War in Moscow. 100,000 square feet of World War II vignettes, some complete with digital recreations of battles.
God, what a job they did.
It is so real for Harold Radish, it's almost unnerving.
This museum is so realistic that the PTSD is pushing. It's pushing up. And you're almost ready to leave to get out in the open air.
And in this impressive room, the names of 12,000 recipients of the Hero of the Soviet Union Award, one of the nation's highest honors, most of them earned during World War II.
Oh, it's amazing. This is so awe-inspiring and so big.
Seems they don't do anything small here in the biggest country in the world. At least not when it comes to remembering the war that helped them emerge as a modern military power. The war they are so clearly proud of to this day. It is just about time to go home for World War II hero Harold Radish. He turned 97 years old just yesterday, and what better birthday present than a trip to his parents' homeland?
How was it?
Wonderful ride. Little noisy.
A place he could never imagine visiting.
It was wonderful being with you young people. It makes me feel more friendly to people of a different country.
As the veterans boarded a boat to cruise St. Petersburg's Neva River, he summed up his time here best.
This is a good turn in my life. The twists are different, but this is a good turn.
A week spent with the heroes of World War II after a lifetime apart. They may not have known each other before now, but they share a bond few others can understand.
So, if people have questions for Harold, again, please type them in the chat. Just on the bottom of your screen, you'll see one word, chat, that has a bubble on top of it. Just click on that and make sure that it's going to everyone or to me. I'm listed here on the list as Jonah Lehman. And we can ask Harold any questions that you have. And as people are typing, Harold, as you're seeing that, as you saw that video again, I'm sure you saw that video several times. What impressions do you want to share with us about being able to travel and meeting people and representing the United States in this kind of effort? What does it feel like seeing that video again?
He asked you a question as to how it felt watching this.
It was kind of, the time has changed. There is a war going on now in the Ukraine.
Right.
And it's a different kind of situation. But at the time that I was in Russia, there was a friendlier feeling. People were getting along. Coming from the US, I always thought that another country would be a small town. But Moscow and Leningrad, St. Petersburg were very big. And things were good in those days. We got along. The people that guided us, all the youngsters, all spoke English. They had learned English in the schools in Russia. In fact, one of the women told me about the synagogue in Moscow. I didn't have time to go there. So it's, you know, a little bit of regret that the times have changed.
Yes, absolutely. And I was also struck by what you said in the video that, you know, even at being a veteran and people kind of glorify World War II in terms of the heroism of all of our soldiers. And you said in the video that people should just talk. There shouldn't be any war.
That's the way I feel about it now. I still feel about it.
Yeah. So there are a few questions in the chat. A couple about your POW experience. So where were you captured? Where were you held captive? How long were you held captive for? And then what happened after you were released?
I was a reconnaissance sergeant, and we were fighting in the Siegfried Line, which is on the border between France and Germany. And the deck of fortifications went back about 17 miles. What my job was to bring a group of guys in at night and get around the pillbox, get around it, take a charge, blow the door in, take over the pillbox so that during the next day, other troops could move up while we had the machine gun on top of the pillbox to cover them. But unfortunately, one night, we got out, we got into what we thought was a pillbox, but it wasn't. It was just a concrete sleeping quarters. Once we got in there must have been about 10 or 11 of us. We couldn't get out anymore. They had surrounded us and our troops had left. We were there for about 3 or 4 days. We had nothing to eat. Drinking, well, we used whatever water was around in the puddle in the back. Some of it was voided from other veterans. And we just couldn't do anything. Somebody yelled one morning, "Do you have wounded?" And the lieutenant that was in charge of us said yes, and they had a discussion. Then he came back in and he said, "It's too late. Nobody's around. We can't get out, and we are prisoners." For that point, I got rid of my dog tags at that point, and there were other people with different religions that got rid of their dog tags also, maybe in sympathy with me or because they felt that their religion wasn't respected either. They could die. We were taken back. This was over a number of days, and we got into a prison camp that was 12A. It was cold. It was February. We didn't have very much of anything. I just had a little jacket because while we were fighting, we didn't need heavy stuff. After we fought during the day, if at night they could come up to us, they would bring us heavy coats and blankets to warm up. But to get back to the prison camp, we had to go through fire that the U.S. Army and the artillery were get through the fields that they had been dropping shells on. We got through. We ended up in these freight cars, and you've all seen them in the movies of, there must have been, I don't know, 70 or 80 of us in this car. We were jammed up, and the only air you had, you'd open the door a little bit. This took about 4 or 5 days to get back to the prison camp. In the prison camp, well, when we got there, it was late at night. We couldn't get in, so I spent the whole night on top of some kind of bushes, freezing half to death, but I made it. I was young and I was lucky. I didn't get trench foot or any of that. We got into the prison camp, and they assigned us to be with Americans. Being a sergeant at the time, they followed the Germans followed the Geneva Convention. So they would keep us in the camp, and wouldn't allow us to go out or work or, because if you went out to work and you got to a farm, you could grab some food or apple or whatever it is. But we were in the camp and we had to stay there. If you want to, I can tell you a little bit about what the day went on, what it was like.
Sure. Why don't you tell us a typical day?
Okay. Morning, you got up, you had a buddy. I can remember this guy to this day. Bright guy, J.J. McEntee. Was like a brother to me. Well, you got up, you opened your clothes up, and you snapped all the lice that had been all over you for the night. Lice, cockroaches, all kinds of nonsense. And you got rid of as much as you could. There was a faucet, so you went over and you washed. Then came the bread. There was a portion, there were bread that they gave you every morning. It was a loaf of bread. It was black bread. There was a little bit of straw in it too, but it was black bread. It must have been about 8 inches long and 3 inches wide. But that wasn't for me. That was for 12 guys for the day. So what you did is you had a guy pick a card. He got the high card. He sliced up that bread into 12 even slices. Because if one got larger than the other, boy, he would hear from us. And why did he do the slicing? Well, he got a slice of bread, but he could keep the crumbs. Everything had a reason. That was the bread in the morning. Then they brought in tanks of what they called soup, but it was just plain black water. I don't know what was in it, but we existed. And during the day, we had a master sergeant that was in charge, and we had some formations. We would get together, talk about who's sick, who died, that kind of thing. And that was it. In the afternoon, this camp was tremendous. It wasn't only Americans. There were people there from India. You name the country, and they were prisoners, and they were there. But many of them went out to work. When they came back, we had a little Wall Street. At about 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the evening, when they came back, they would raise up a carrot, a potato, an apple. You raised up a finger, 1, a half, 2. You were dealing. They said that they had a potato. You said you had 1 cigarette. If it was okay, you made a deal. You wrapped the cigarette, you threw it to them, and they threw you the potato or the apple or whatever it was. We were lucky. It was about 3 to close to 4 months that we endured this. The big thing was we got a Red Cross package. 2 of us had to share it. I shared it with J.J. McEntee, but luckily he didn't smoke. So there were some cigarettes in the package, and we could deal with the cigarettes. So whatever deal we made, who did we deal with? We dealt with the guards. You give a guard 2 cigarettes, eventually he'd bring you a sweater or something, some food. Oh, I remember one thing. I was in a latrine, and I was sitting there, and I see a guy is talking to the wall, which is not unusual in a prison camp. And he's talking to the wall, and I'm looking, and all of a sudden, he raises up his hands and pulls out a cement block from the wall, sticks his hand in, and out comes a loaf of bread, big white piece of bread. And I looked at him and I said, "Hey, what can you do for me?" And he says, "Well, what do you got to trade?" Well, I had 2 pair of pants on. I said, "I'll give you a pair of pants." He said, "Okay, get out." Made me go into another room so I wouldn't know what the heck he was doing. And we got a loaf of bread. That was the biggest trade I ever made in my life. And I brought that to McEntee, and we were so very happy. It was just a matter of enduring time. And being able to get along. Cigarettes were the big thing. You ran out of cigarettes, you rolled coffee or you rolled tea and you smoked that.
Hey, Hal, what about the story where the German asked you about your background and you talked about radish and pepper?
Oh, that's at an interrogation when we first went in. They interrogated me. Guy spoke perfect English. And he says to me, well, we went through the whole business. He tells me where he went to school in the United States and all. And then he said, Radish, what kind of name is that? And I knew what he was looking for. And I said, the British like pepper. And he goes, and off I went. He gave me a loaf of bread at that time.
Wow.
And that meant that I had told him a secret or something. But during the evening or the day, I found everybody got a loaf of bread, so that everybody was supposed to be guilty.
So they never found out you were Jewish?
I never did. Oh, wait a minute. Yes. We were going between prison camps once, and what we did before we got into the new prison camp, you had a blanket. Every prisoner made sure he had a blanket and a cup. In case somebody was giving something away, you put your cup out. Right. The blanket had holes in it, but it was a blanket. Before you got into camp, you spread the blanket out. Whatever you had in your pockets, you had to put on the blanket so that they could check it. What you didn't want them to see, you put under the blanket and you dug a little hole. Some guy came by, a German soldier, must have been an officer, in a white shirt. That means he was an officer. He may have even been an SS man. And like a jerk, I said to him, we were waiting. I said, wie lang? And he looked at me and he said, Jude, you verfluchter Mensch, you started the war, Wall Street. I thought he was going to kill me. But somebody called him and he went away. Some of the guys came over and said, Radish, never saw you like that. You were so white. I said, don't worry. Took me a while to get back. Wow. That was the hardest point in my prison camp life, where I really felt that I may get it.
Yeah. So you said you're in the camp for 4 months until the British came and liberated the camp. What happened then to you after that? Were you still serving? Did you go home?
Well, when the British came, the Germans had disappeared. We got out, there was food, we had some food. The big thing that happened that same day is we were like sheep. They took shears, made us strip. They threw our clothing away. They must have burned it. They made us strip and they sheared every bit of hair of us, cleaned us up, washed us down, gave us, I don't know what, DDT, which is not good, but they threw it all over us. They cleaned us up.
Right.
We were there in the camp under the British auspices. They were feeding us at that time. Then they flew us into Brussels. In fact, I was in the British Army for a week. I had a British uniform, and it was all good. Then I got to Brussels. At that point, I rejoined the American Army. That was, I remember that date. It was VE Day. And from there, we stayed, and then they sent us to a place called Lucky Strike. Cigarettes were the big thing. You could have bought all of Germany or England, whatever, with cigarettes.
Right.
So every camp, out of camp, they named Lucky Strike. It was Lucky Strike. They had other names for other camps. Right. There we stayed for about a week in tents, waiting to be shipped home. When Eisenhower flew in, because we were a little idioty, we were making noise because we wanted to get home, but he said he still has the war in Japan to fight, and it'll take us a couple of days, but don't worry, you'll get home. From there, wait a minute. While I was in that Lucky Strike, we had to wait 3 or 4 guys got together and they said, well, let's go to Paris. The camp was right outside of Le Havre and you could have catch a truck. I said, but we have no passes. So the guy said, so what are they going to do? Make you a prisoner again? We went to Paris, spent a few days, not looking at the scenery, but we came back.
Right.
And from there, they put us on a boat. And I remember it, the USS West Point, where we ate like kings. Food was the big thing.
Wow.
I got into New York, got to a phone booth. You remember those? Years ago, we had phone booth.
Yeah.
Put my nickel into the phone booth, dialed home. My mother answered the phone and I said, Mom, I'm home. She yelled out, oh my God, he's alive.
Wow.
You see what had happened in the interim while I was in the prison camp.
Yeah.
She had gotten a telegram, your son is a prisoner of war. So that tore her apart. She couldn't even read the telegram. So my aunt took her to the Red Cross and, whatever. So it was.
Wow.
And you should remember this or think of this. The people that really, really suffered a lot were the parents. It wasn't like today where you can call with an iPhone or somewhere, somebody's in Europe or Afghanistan, wherever it is, you can keep in touch.
Right.
In those days, there was V-mail, but it didn't go through that often while we were in the prison camp. I never got any mail in the prison camp. They didn't know what the heck was going on with us.
Right. Right.
Parents were worried about you. You know, here's somebody that's away, a prisoner or in war, people are shooting at him. When I left my home, my mother was a vivacious, dark-haired woman, a housewife that was taking care of our house and, and all of that. When I got back, it hurt me so much. This woman was a looked like a broken, gray-haired old woman. It took her months to recover.
Wow.
I was young. I had the life in me. I could do what I wanted. I had a couple of extra meals. I would be all right. But for her and for parents, I can imagine it was other parents too, that it at least, look, I was alive. A lot of parents didn't have their children coming.
Yeah. Harold, this is an incredible story, and just the attitude, your outlook that you're conveying. I mean, that must have something to do with why you're still here at 97 years old, sharing these stories with us. And even as you're sharing the story today, just being more concerned for other people than talking about your suffering in the POW camp. There are a couple other questions. Somebody had a question about so the video that we saw about the reunion in Russia. So it was I think it was introduced as French, American, and Russian soldiers. So someone had a question: why weren't British soldiers included? Do you have any idea?
I have no idea.
Right.
I have no idea.
They were included. They didn't come.
I don't know. I don't know.
That's what I heard.
I know. The French were of the same age as myself, and we little by little we could get together and talk. And in fact, being in France, I was awarded the Legion of Honor, the French Legion of Honor. So I showed them my medal, etc., and we were buddies all of a sudden.
Right.
We had a couple of medals that were hanging from our jackets, etc. But whenever you ran into a Russian soldier, he had medals that went from his shoulder down to his knees.
Yeah. Somebody wants to know what was your regiment or what was your division in the Army that you were in?
I was in the 90th Division.
Okay.
I called Texas, Oklahoma, but I don't know if anybody was there from Texas or Oklahoma.
Okay.
I got there, not that I trained with them. I was in a training camp in Mississippi, but then I was sent to Europe as a replacement.
Okay. So do you have separate reunions just for your 90th Division?
I never went.
You never went.
I never went because it's the only guy I met once or twice was JJ John McEntee
Yeah.
in New York every
Uh-huh.
so often.
Uh-huh.
But otherwise, the other people I didn't know for
Right.
reasons. I wasn't that enthused with being a veteran or professional soldier. My next step was to get an education and
Yeah.
get a job.
Right. Right.
You know, and the big thing in my family was get into civil service.
Uh-huh.
Because then you'll get a job, you'll have a salary, you'll get a vacation, and they'll pay you for your vacation.
Right. Somebody wanted to know what town in Russia you are from. I think the video said quickly that you went to see your parents' hometown. So what town was that? And
My mother came from Brest-Litovsk. It's Grodno. It's near Minsk in that area.
Yeah.
It's sort of very close to Poland. In those days, it was changing. It was Hungary, Polish, Russian,
right.
And it was the day of the Cossacks. They were giving the Jews a hard time, which always happens, you know.
Right.
That's why one of the reasons, besides being poor, that they came to the United States.
Right. Right. So you got to go to that town while you were there in Russia?
No, I got close. I got close, but I didn't get into the town. There's
Okay.
another question.
Yeah, it was just somebody just following up, saying that their family is from Brest-Litovsk also.
From Brest-Litovsk. Well, in the museum, there was a big exhibit, a whole real life exhibit of the fighting at Brest-Litovsk during World War II. That's very close, I guess, to Leningrad, Stalingrad.
Right. Somebody asked if you experienced any anti-Semitism in the army here in America before you went over to Europe, like in training or anything like that.
Well, there was something always underlined. The kids from the South didn't know who the hell we were. They always asked me, oh, you're Jewish. Where was your father's department store?
Oh.
You know, because a lot of Jews went out, peddled in those areas, and they eventually started a store and they grew.
Right.
But that's what they knew about being Jewish. One time, I wanted to go home on a furlough because I don't remember what it was. It was a Jewish holiday. And somehow the sergeant, the guy that was over me, somehow was saying, no. Eventually I got to the captain and I got home. The reason wasn't that it was a Jewish holiday. It was that they shipped out some men from that training camp to Europe that time. Well, I had a break at that time.
Right.
For the struggles of the
Yeah. There aren't any other questions.
Can I ask Hal a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, I guess about 30 or 40 years ago, you brought us letters. And your letters from the camp that came back, and then your mother's letters.
We found the letters that he wrote to his parents and his family
Right.
while he was in the army, and they all came back. They had never been opened, and they all came back.
Oh.
Her letters.
Her letters.
Oh,
His mother's
her.
letters. They had never been opened.
And they were missing in action. They were
Right.
stamped missing in action.
Right.
Yeah.
So we opened them up and we read them.
As I said, that is the hardest memory as what my parents went through.
Right. So they, so you said that your mother before the war was this dark-haired, bubbly kind of personality. And you said after the war, when you saw her, she was broken. Did she ever recover?
Yes, she did. It took her 6-7 months and she recovered.
Yeah.
And then she watched me very carefully.
Right. That's right.
I once went, I never forget, I was still, I guess on furlough or whatever it was. I went into the city and I came home that night. It must have been 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning. And who's sitting in the kitchen waiting for me to come home? Mama.
Right.
I said, Mom, I've been in a war. I've been shot at. I've been in a prison camp. I'm okay. I can take care of myself. She says, when you're in my house, you do it.
That's right. Different kind of prison camp. But that's what Jewish mothers are like. Yeah. Yeah. Somebody wrote in the chat, thank you for the presentation. You're truly blessed to survive. I'm a child of the Holocaust, child survivor of the Holocaust, and lost many family members. The memories will always be with me. I'm so glad that you're able to make the trip. There's 120, she said.
120.
Yeah.
120. That's my goal.
That's it. Very good. Very good. Yeah. Well, Harold, we can't thank you enough for, well, there was another question about the Brooklyn Dodgers, whether you were a Dodgers fan, a Yankees fan, what?
Oh, I was a Dodger fan. I went to Ebbets Field many times. But once the Dodgers left Ebbets Field, I forgot about baseball.
Yeah. My wife was from Brooklyn, and she the first 5 years of her life was in an apartment building that was built over the old Ebbets Field.
Oh,
yeah.
That's where guys went up on the roof to watch the game if they could.
Yeah.
Or the Knothole Club.
Right. Well, Harold, thank you very much. I mean, I tell you, just listening to you speak about this and watching those videos really quite inspirational.
Well,
yeah.
Rabbi, let me thank you for the opportunity, and let me thank you for taking it the way it came. Unfortunately, the times have changed between the time I was Russia and here.
Right.
Now, where the war is going on in Yugoslavia. So thank you again.
Right. No, it's our pleasure, Harold, and we're glad that we made this connection, and it's quite inspirational. And in these days, as we're remembering the Holocaust, it's Yom HaShoah tomorrow night and Wednesday and Thursday. It's important to remember people like you who fought for our freedom, people like you who suffered and were prisoners in order for us to be free. And we need to appreciate you and your generation, everything that you did in order for us to be able to still be Jewish, to still be proud Americans. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Right.
Thank you, everyone. And apparently there were some people who had a hard time connecting. There was an issue, but this is recorded. So if you speak to anybody, we will be able to send out the link and they can watch the recording.
So two things. Babette wants to share something about Sunday, and I'll share something about our program tomorrow night. So go ahead, Babette.
Sorry. Thank you, Rabbi Lehman. First, thank you, Harold, for joining us, and Ellen for bringing his story to us to begin with, that he could do this. I'm sorry, my voice is scratchy. I'm getting over COVID myself right now. If you are in the Olney area and you are interested, on Sunday, May 1st at 10, starting at 10 in the morning, we are having an intergenerational program related to Yom HaShoah. We're viewing a movie called The Samuel Project together with the teen students. And there's going to be a guided discussion along with that. And I would love to have people, it doesn't have to be people who lived through the Holocaust, certainly, and we don't need to have people who survived the Holocaust, but people who have memories of growing up as young people, maybe during the 40s and 50s, and have memories of, or are children of survivors, even who